A taser for a blind woman, a decorated veteran, just for crossing the street. 7 minutes later, military tanks weren't asking questions. They were shutting it all down. Samantha, Sam, Bell, 75 years old and a woman who navigated the world without sight, moved with a quiet dignity that belied the darkness she inhabited. Her companion, guide, an aging but still astute black Labrador, was more than a service dog, he was her anchor. Sam had lost her vision decades ago, not in a dramatic battlefield explosion, but to an aggressive infection contracted while serving as an army nurse in a disease-ridden, remote jungle during a largely forgotten Cold War humanitarian mission. The field hospital conditions had been appalling, resources scarce. She'd fought for her patients, and then for her own sight, but the damage was irreversible. Now, she lived an independent life in a small, meticulously kept apartment in a typical American town. Her days were structured by routine, early morning walks with guide, the dog's harness a familiar pressure in her hand, visits to the local veteran center where she connected with others who understood her service, and long afternoons lost in audiobooks. Sam wore her experiences not as a burden, but as a part of her. Her clothing was simple, often a well-worn, olive green field jacket from her era of service, always clean, a nod to a past she rarely spoke of but carried in her upright posture, a discipline ingrained from years in uniform. She might have been elderly and blind, but her spirit remained undimmed. She could identify the rumble of different city buses by their engine sounds and knew the scent of the bakery 3 blocks away from the faint aroma of yeast and sugar that drifted on the morning breeze. Today, a particular highlight, she and guide were en route to the public library. Her weekly volunteer shift, reading to children, filled her with a unique joy. It was a connection to a brighter, more innocent world. They approached the busy intersection of Elm and 3rd, a notoriously difficult crossing even for the sighted, with its fast-turning traffic and frustratingly short pedestrian signals. Sam patiently waited, guide sitting calmly by her left side, his presence a warm reassurance. Parked just around the corner, obscured by a delivery truck, Officers Miller and Davis, barely a year out of the academy, were idly finishing their lukewarm coffees. Restlessness hummed between them, the kind born from tedious hours and an unfulfilled desire for some real action. Miller, a young man whose uniform seemed a size too big for his experience, spotted Sam and guide stepping into the crosswalk. "Look at this old broad," Miller muttered to Davis, a smirk playing on his lips. "Taking her sweet time. Probably going to cause a pile-up." Davis, equally quick to judge and eager to mirror his partner's cynicism, added, "Probably senile or on something. These old folks shouldn't be wandering around by themselves." Neither officer registered the bright orange vest on the service dog, nor the rhythmic tap-tap-tapping of Sam's white cane against the pavement, classic indicators of visual impairment. They didn't consider the audible pedestrian signal that had chirped just moments before, a clear invitation to cross. All they saw was an elderly woman moving slowly, an impediment, a potential problem in their otherwise uneventful shift. Their shared glance was one of bored condescension, a silent agreement that this was an annoyance they'd have to deal with. Their cruiser's interior, littered with empty energy drink cans and fast food wrappers, subtly reflected their casual approach to their duties. The pedestrian signal was already flashing its red, "Don't walk," warning, its audible clicks counting down with aggressive speed as Sam and guide reached the halfway point. Cars, eager for the light change, began to inch forward. Miller, with an impatient sigh, flicked on the siren for a short, sharp yelp, then grabbed the cruiser's PA microphone. "Hey, you in the crosswalk. Get a move on." "Lights changing," he blared, the amplified voice distorted and harsh. Sam, disoriented by the sudden, blaring sound erupting from an unexpected direction, faltered. Her carefully constructed auditory map of the intersection shattered. She couldn't pinpoint the source of the voice, only its aggressive tone. Guide, startled by the cacophony, stopped abruptly, his body tensing, looking around nervously, his usual calm replaced by uncertainty. "I said move it." Miller boomed again over the PA, his voice laced with growing irritation. "What are you, deaf and blind or something? Cars were now honking, a chorus of impatience directed at the figure in the middle of the road. Confused and increasingly anxious, Sam tried to urge Guide forward, but the dog, sensing danger, was now hesitant, pulling back slightly. Sam's heart began to pound. She tapped her cane more rapidly, a desperate attempt to reorient herself, to find the safety of the curb. She could feel the vibrations of the idling engines, smell the exhaust fumes, a suffocating wave of sensory overload. She was directly in the path of oncoming traffic as the main traffic light turned a glaring green. A few onlookers on the sidewalk frowned, a flicker of concern in their eyes at the officer's aggressive handling of the situation. "She's not complying," Davis said to Miller, a note of feigned seriousness in his voice as he reached for his radio. "Looks like she's resisting, possibly creating a public disturbance." Miller, fueled by a surge of adrenaline and a grossly misplaced sense of authority, made a split-second, disastrous decision. He threw open his cruiser door and jumped out, his hand reflexively going to the taser on his belt. "Ma'am, stop resisting. Stay on the sidewalk. I warned you," he yelled, even though Sam was clearly in the middle of the street, disoriented, and resisting nothing but the chaos engulfing her. Sam heard the shouting, felt the heavy vibrations of the now advancing cars, the panicked pull on Guide's harness as the loyal dog tried to move her out of danger. She was utterly confused, her world of sound and routine violently fractured by the aggressive, unseen commands. "I'm trying. I'm blind," she managed to call out, her voice thin with fear, barely audible above the traffic noise. But Officer Miller was already advancing, taser aimed, its yellow marking stark against his dark uniform. "Last chance. Get out of the road." Before Sam could utter another word, before any bystander could physically intervene, Miller fired. The taser barbs, sharp and cruel, struck Sam in the back. She cried out, a sharp, involuntary sound of agony as 50,000 volts coursed through her frail, 75-year-old frame. Her legs buckled instantly. She collapsed onto the grimy asphalt of the crosswalk, a heap of vulnerability. Her white cane flew from her grasp, skittering under a nearby car with a hollow clatter, a symbol of her lost independence. Guide, though terrified, stayed steadfastly by her side, barking frantically, nudging Sam's face with his wet nose, desperately trying to rouse his fallen mistress. Officer Davis rushed forward, not to offer aid to the elderly woman now spasming on the ground, but to secure the resisting suspect. He roughly pulled Sam's arms behind her back, the cold metal of handcuffs clicking shut around her thin wrists. Onlookers gasped in horror. Cell phones were already out, screens glowing as they recorded the unfolding travesty. A woman screamed from the sidewalk, "She's blind, you idiots. She's got a service dog. What are you doing to that poor old lady?" Within minutes, summoned by a flurry of bystander calls and Davis's earlier, now tragically understated, radio call about an obstructing pedestrian, paramedics and a police supervisor, Sergeant Kelly, arrived. Sergeant Kelly, a woman in her late 40s with tired eyes that had seen too much but missed little, took one look at the scene, the elderly woman on the ground, the taser wires glinting, the distressed service dog, the horrified, filming onlookers, and her face hardened into a mask of grim understanding. She immediately knelt beside Sam. "Remove those handcuffs, now," she snapped at Davis, her voice like ice. While one paramedic began assessing Sam, Kelly started administering basic first aid herself, her movements efficient and gentle. "What in God's name happened here, Miller?" she demanded, her gaze pinning the suddenly less confident young officer. Miller stammered about non-compliance and public safety. Davis, pale and shaken, looked like he was about to be sick. Kelly, noting Sam's age and the clear indicators of her disability, felt a cold knot of anger and dismay tighten in her stomach. As the paramedics carefully attended to Sam, who was groggy, disoriented, and in considerable pain, a series of urgent, discreet phone calls were being made by witnesses. One such call came from a retired Marine gunnery sergeant, a man named Henderson, who happened to be having coffee at a nearby cafe. He'd seen the entire incident unfold, his initial disbelief turning to cold fury. He knew protocol, and he knew who to call when a fellow veteran, especially a blind, elderly woman, was so egregiously mistreated. He dialed a number that bypassed usual channels, a direct line to an old, trusted contact within the Regional Joint Military Command, a liaison officer who owed him a significant favor and shared his unwavering loyalty to those who had served. He spoke quickly, his voice low but firm, detailing the unwarranted aggression, the use of a taser, and the victim's status as a blind female veteran. He didn't need to embellish, the facts were damning enough. 7 minutes. That's how long it took from the moment Samantha Bell collapsed on the crosswalk for the ordinary urban soundscape of Elm and 3rd to be fundamentally, irrevocably altered. The distant, then rapidly approaching, distinctive rumble began. It wasn't the high-pitched wail of police cruisers or ambulances, but something deeper, more resonant, more powerful, the unmistakable growl of heavy diesel engines. Then, the lead vehicle appeared, an olive-drab Humvee, its emergency lights flashing not with civilian urgency, but with military precision. It didn't slow for the haphazard police perimeter, it drove right through it, its sheer bulk forcing surprised officers to scramble out of its path. It stopped, angling itself expertly to block one entire approach to the intersection. Immediately behind it, a second Humvee mirrored the maneuver on the opposite side. Then, a larger LMTV, a light-medium tactical vehicle, rumbled into position, its heavy tires crushing a discarded traffic cone, effectively sealing off the 3rd approach. Within 60 seconds, the entire busy intersection was under an impromptu, unofficial military lockdown. Soldiers in full combat fatigues, sidearms holstered but clearly visible, disembarked from the vehicles. They moved with a calm, practiced efficiency, taking up observant positions around the periphery. They weren't aggressive, but their presence radiated an air of absolute, unshakable control. Their Kevlar helmets and tactical vests were a stark contrast to the police officers' standard uniforms. They didn't interfere with the paramedics attending to Sam, but their very existence was a powerful, silent statement, a heavy curtain of authority descending upon the chaotic scene. The air crackled with a new kind of tension, one that made the previous commotion seem almost trivial. Sergeant Kelly, the police supervisor, stared in disbelief, her radio already crackling with confused calls from dispatch about unauthorized military vehicles blocking a major city artery. Officers Miller and Davis looked like they had seen ghosts, their faces ashen, their earlier bravado completely gone. The civilian onlookers were stunned into a mixture of silence and awe, their phones still recording, but now with a sense of trepidation and dawning respect. This was no ordinary response, this was something far beyond any standard protocol. From the lead Humvee, a figure emerged. Tall, ramrod straight despite his years, he wore the crisp duty uniform of a United States Army 4-star general. His chest was adorned with an impressive, though not ostentatious, array of ribbons, each one a testament to a lifetime of service and command. It was General Michael Vance, commander of the entire regional army forces, a man renowned for his decisive leadership, his sharp intellect, and an almost paternalistic loyalty to his soldiers, past and present. He had been at a nearby military base, ironically in a meeting discussing improvements to veteran outreach programs, when the urgent call about Sergeant Samantha Bell, a name he vaguely recalled from commendation rolls or perhaps disability advocacy reports, had come through via his aide. General Vance strode purposefully towards the center of the intersection, his aide scrambling to keep up. He ignored the stunned police officers, his gaze fixed on the scene where Sam Bell was being carefully lifted onto a stretcher, guide whining softly beside her, held gently by a sympathetic paramedic. The general reached Sergeant Kelly. "Sergeant," he said, his voice calm, but carrying the unmistakable weight of command that could quiet a battlefield. "I am General Vance. What is the status of Sergeant Samantha Bell?" Sergeant Kelly, though a seasoned officer, was visibly taken aback by the general's sudden, imposing appearance and the undeclared military occupation of her scene. "General, sir," she managed, her voice betraying a slight tremor. "Ms. Bell. Sergeant Bell is stable, conscious. She appears to have been tossed by one of my officers during what was initially a pedestrian stop. Paramedics are transporting her to City General for full evaluation." The general's eyes, like chips of blue ice, flickered towards Officer Miller and Officer Davis, who were standing stiffly, their faces pale and slick with sweat, looking utterly terrified. "Tased." General Vance repeated the word, his tone flat, devoid of inflection, yet heavy with unspoken condemnation that resonated louder than any shout. "For what offense, Sergeant? Did your officers deem it necessary, in their professional judgment, to use a taser on an unarmed, 75-year-old blind woman attempting to cross the street with her service dog?" Sergeant Kelly, to her credit, didn't prevaricate. "Sir, the initial report was pedestrian obstructing traffic, allegedly resisting instruction." However, she paused, choosing her words carefully, based on multiple witness statements and the obvious presence of Ms. Bell's white cane and service animal. "It appears a catastrophic error in judgment, potentially a gross misapplication of force, may have occurred." "An error in judgment," General Vance echoed, his voice still dangerously quiet. He then looked directly at Miller and Davis, his gaze so intense they visibly flinched. "Officers," he addressed them directly for the first time. "Did either of you clearly identify yourselves before engaging Ms. Bell? Did you ascertain her disability, which, I am told, was quite evident? Did you offer assistance, as per both police protocol and common human decency, when you observed an elderly, blind individual apparently disoriented in a busy intersection?" Miller stammered, "Sir, she wasn't responding to commands. She seemed agitated, sir." "Agitated?" The general cut him off, his voice dropping further, a silken threat. "Perhaps because she was blind, confused by your blaring PA system, and in imminent danger of being run over by traffic moments before one of you shot her with 50,000 volts of electricity." He took a deliberate step closer to the two officers, who seemed to shrink under his scrutiny. "Sergeant Samantha Bell lost her sight serving this country, in a place and under conditions most people cannot even imagine. She has navigated this city independently for decades with her service dog. What she encountered today was not a public disturbance. It was a failure of observation, a failure of training, a failure of empathy, and a gross, inexcusable abuse of authority. Your actions, officers, have not only grievously harmed a decorated veteran, they have brought profound discredit upon your department and dangerously eroded public trust." General Vance turned back to Sergeant Kelly, his expression unyielding. "Sergeant, I expect a full and transparent internal affairs investigation into this incident. Furthermore," he stated, his voice leaving no room for debate, "I will be formally requesting a parallel investigation by the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. My office will be monitoring both investigations closely." He then gestured curtly to one of his aides, a major, who stepped forward instantly with a satellite phone already connecting a call. "I am also formally requesting," the general continued, his eyes still on Kelly but his words intended for a wider audience, "that the mayor and your chief of police meet me at City General Hospital within the hour. We will discuss this department's training protocols regarding interaction with disabled individuals, particularly disabled veterans. We will also discuss the appropriate, and clearly inappropriate, use of force by your officers." Sergeant Kelly, her face grim but resolute, nodded sharply. "Understood, General. We will cooperate fully. You have my word." The gravity of the situation, and the swiftness of the impending official storm, was lost on no one present. The general then walked over to the ambulance just as the paramedics were about to close the doors with Sam secured inside on a gurney. He leaned in, his imposing frame softening slightly. "Sam. Sergeant Bell. It's General Mike Vance. Can you hear me, Samantha?" Sam, though pale and clearly in pain, her hand instinctively clutching Guide's fur as the dog lay quietly beside her stretcher, managed a weak nod, her brow furrowed in confusion. "General Vance, what?" "Don't you worry about a thing, Sam," the general said, his voice now considerably gentler, imbued with a warmth that was almost startling. "You're in good hands now. We'll take care of everything. You just focus on getting checked out by the doctors. Guide will be looked after, right beside you." He reached in and gently patted Guide's head, the dog offering a weak tail wag. Then, his voice hardened again, just enough for the nearby, still trembling officers Miller and Davis to clearly hear, "And those responsible for this outrage, they will be held accountable." He stepped back, gave a slight nod to the paramedics, and the ambulance pulled away, its siren now a mournful, fading sound. General Vance watched the ambulance disappear down the street, his posture unbent, his expression resolute. He then turned slowly to face the still-blocked intersection, the stunned and now thoroughly chastened remaining police officers, and the silent, watching crowd. His message, delivered without shouting, without overt aggression, had been utterly clear and devastatingly effective. An injustice against one veteran, particularly a vulnerable female veteran like Samantha Bell, was an injustice the full weight of military concern might be brought to bear to address. Especially when that veteran was one of their own. Sightless, but not unseen, unheard, but not without a voice that could summon thunder. The city of Monroeville was about to learn a very hard, very public lesson about its obligation to protect all its citizens, especially its heroes. The crowd began to disperse slowly, murmuring amongst themselves, the image of the general and the military vehicles seared into their memories. Some even offered quiet nods of respect towards the stoic soldiers still maintaining their positions. The fallout was swift and severe, just as General Vance had intended. The mayor and the chief of police did indeed meet him at City General Hospital, emerging hours later looking visibly shaken and publicly promising immediate, comprehensive reforms to police training and conduct. Officers Miller and Davis were immediately suspended without pay, pending the outcome of the multiple, high-level investigations now underway. Footage of the incident, captured by numerous cell phones, flooded social media within hours, hashtag Justice for SGTSAM trending nationally, sparking widespread outrage and condemnation of the officers' actions. The Monroeville Police Department, facing immense public pressure and the unblinking scrutiny of General Vance's office, fast-tracked the development and implementation of a new training program. This program, unofficially dubbed the Sam Bell Protocol by some within the department, focused heavily on de-escalation techniques, crisis intervention, and respectful interaction with individuals with disabilities, with a specific, mandatory module on identifying and assisting veterans, particularly elderly or female veterans. Samantha Bell recovered slowly from the physical effects of the tasing, though the emotional trauma, the betrayal by those sworn to protect, lingered. General Vance personally ensured she received the best possible follow-up care, including counseling, and that Guide was also checked by a veterinarian and comforted. The local veterans community, especially women veteran groups, rallied around Sam, providing a network of support, solidarity, and shared understanding. In a later, quiet conversation at the Veterans Center, away from the glare of the media, General Vance sat with Sam. He simply said, his voice gentle but firm, "No one gets left behind, Samantha. Not on my watch. Not ever. You spent your life navigating darkness in service to us. The very least we can do is ensure your path is safe now." And for a while, at least in that city, the path for vulnerable citizens, especially those who had served, became a little clearer, a little safer. It was a stark, painful reminder of the vulnerabilities faced by disabled veterans and the critical, ongoing need for better training, profound empathy, and unwavering accountability within law enforcement. All because one blind female veteran's mistreatment brought the quiet thunder of military concern to a standstill at Elm 3rd. It was a testament to the fact that when you harm one who has already sacrificed so much, you may find yourself facing an army of support you never anticipated. Samantha's story reminds us that those who have sacrificed for our nation, especially our brave female pioneers in service, deserve our fiercest protection and deepest gratitude. If you agree that accountability is paramount and that we must never forget those who have navigated darkness for us, please type "Respect Our Heroines" in the comments below. Share this story to spread awareness, and subscribe for more content that honors true courage.